Hello and welcome. Today I want to show you how I made a journal cover using that hardback book cover and a napkin as the main image design on the front. I used some fabrics and some other things, but I'll go through the whole process. So first I want to gut the book. If you're saving the spine, you want to be careful that you don't cut into the spine area, which is easy to do, so you have to be a little bit careful. But for this cover, I decided that I wanted the spine to be a little bit wider than it is currently. So I'm cutting that part out, the spine out, and I'm going to add in a fabric spine, which you'll see later. Now I'm going to trim my covers a little bit to make them a little bit neater, but that's all going to be covered up anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfectly neat and clean. I'm going to cover my covers with gesso because I'm going to do some painting and some other things on the cover. So I cover the whole thing with some gesso. Then I am adding brown. I had in mind, the reason I'm adding brown, such a dark color, is because, and you want to make sure, by the way, that you go into the paint the sides of your book and into a little bit on the inside. I'm showing you some papers that I was thinking about using on the inside my journal, and I ended up not using those, so that's not important. But I was trying to match the paint with those papers and my napkin. So I used some other papers on the inside that are neutral, so the color choice wasn't as important for the inside as it is for the outside and the colors and the napkin. And I hope all that makes sense. So the reason I put the brown on first is I had this idea that I would cover the brown with the greens there that you see, and then I would sand it to have it look a little bit distressed so that brown would show through a little bit. And I did eventually do that, but it took a little while to get there. So I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, but I had an idea in mind. And so, with mixed media, anyway, the way I do it is you just keep going until you're happy with your results. So there I'm mixing those two paints. It's a little bit blotchy, if you're doing something like this and you want to blend it a little better, of course you can do that. I'm going on to the edges on the inside a little bit, like I said before, and I'm going to paint both of those cover, the front and the back cover. So after I did all that, I decided it was a little bit too dark for what I wanted, the look that I wanted. So I'm using that lighter, kind of like a light mint green over the whole thing, but I know it looks like I'm covering everything, but I'm going to go over it with a paper towel, like a damp paper towel or a damp baby wipe, and tone it down a little bit so it lightens up the cover, but you can still see, as you see there, you can still see some of the green underneath. And I'm looking at my napkin. Now I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's a little too light, so I'm going to go back in with some green. I chose a little different green color, and I'm adding that in. I have kind of mixed it with the lighter mint green also, and I'm liking that so far, so I'm going to continue with that. I'm mixing those two colors together to get that light green color. So I'm going to continue this, and again, it's just something that I'm going to keep working on until I get the look that I'm satisfied with, the colors and the look that I'm satisfied with. I don't want it to be too dark and I don't want it to be too light. So I will jump ahead in just a moment, and you'll see the end result. And again, I'm showing how I'm looking at the napkin and deciding what to do next. I decided I wanted a little more green, so that's what I'm doing. Okay, there are my pieces and how that turned out. I put some green on the inside there, which a little bit will show. I've pulled out some scrapbook papers while those covers were drying and some other papers and made my 3 signatures. That's what I decided to do for this journal. I decided to make a 3 signature journal. Now, this is the paper I chose to cover up the inside covers. And I'm not measuring, I just mark it with a pencil and then cut it down, cut 2 pieces because it should be the same size for each cover. And I will use those later. So here's the sanding part. I was trying to see if there was some kind of information on the grit of the sandpaper, but I wanted to use something that was a little stronger there just to take that paint off a little bit. And you can see there that the brown is showing through. I'm just doing this kind of randomly. I'm not really, I don't have a plan in mind, just doing it randomly here and there. Excuse me. And I'll continue doing that on both covers, front and back. In a moment, you'll see how that turned out there. Okay, I've got my napkin ready. You'll see how that kind of looks a little blotchy, but no worries, it all looks good in the end. So to take the napkin apart, I use a piece of tape. I put one side, sticky side on one side, one on the other, and then pull it apart carefully. Some napkins have 2 layers and some have 3. This one had 3 layers, so I have to take the other layer off as well. And I do the same thing. I was trying to figure out if it had an extra layer, and it did. So I have my 2 pieces of tape. I do the same thing carefully because that can tear if you're not too careful. I mean, if you're not careful. So I have my napkin. I'm going to use the 2 birds on the branch, and I'm going to use a paintbrush with a little bit of water and just trace the outline with my paintbrush of where I want to tear the napkin. So if you haven't seen this before, the water makes it easier to tear the image. If you cut it, it makes a very straight, sort of blunt line that I don't like, so the tearing helps it blend into your background a little better. So I go through a little bit of trying to figure out how much of the napkin to tear and where to put it, but I end up, as you'll see in a moment, deciding to put the birds down near the bottom, and I take off as much of that white part of the napkin as I can, because even though it's going to be a little bit translucent when I attach it, you still can see it a little bit. And I'm just saying there that I'm going to need something at the top because the birds are down there at the bottom of the journal, so it's a little bit unbalanced to me, and you'll see how I fix that. So there you can see the parts that I've torn off of my napkin, following the same procedure with my paintbrush with the water. And then I decided to do some stamping on my cover, and I have this real pretty script stamp. I've had this one forever, and I do love it. I use it quite often. And again, I'm doing some random stamping. I'm using archival ink, which is permanent, so it won't smudge if I add more things to the front, which I'm going to do. So it will be permanent when it's dry. Some of that stamping will be covered up, and that's okay. So I didn't want to go overboard on the stamping. I just did a little bit, and I'm going to do the same thing on the back. Now, the moment of truth, I'm going to attach my napkin to the front cover. I saw this on a couple of videos, how to attach a napkin with no wrinkles. Mine had like 1 wrinkle, to be honest, but it was really great, this process. So I have a page protector there, and I'm cutting off the front part of it to use. I lay my image down, face down on the plastic, spray it with water. You want a good amount of water. You want your whole image to be saturated, but you don't want it swimming in water either. And then you just very carefully spread it out to have it be, as straight and as wrinkle-free as possible. Although, I'm not that careful with everything. So if I have a few wrinkles, I don't mind. I just don't want it to look too messy. So you put matte medium down, that's fluid matte medium, on your surface that you want to attach the napkin to. I use way too much, as you can see. You want a thin layer, but you want to make sure the whole area is covered. And so I want to make sure I go beyond where I know the napkin's going to be, because I just want to make sure I have enough there. So you want a nice, even, thin layer, and then I'm blotting up a little bit of the water, and then you flip that over, position it where you want it, and then you press that down. The matte medium should hold it on in place, and you'll see in a moment, it's almost like a rub-on. You want to just like press it down so it starts attaching. At first it wasn't staying down, and I was really nervous that it wasn't going to work, because this is the very first time I tried this, but it worked, as you'll see momentarily. I just love this way of attaching napkins now. I think I'm going to do it all the time. So look how nice that looks. I'm going to let that dry. I'm happy with it. You can see a few wrinkles here and there, but in general, I think it looks really nice. Okay, so I'm going to add some gold around the edges of my covers. As you can see, there's some nice gold paint. I like to do this with a lot of my projects that involve paint and use a little touch of gold. So I'm going to edge around both the front and the back cover. Okay, I decided for my spine that I'm going to use fabric for the spine. So this is one occasion where I actually have to measure. Those are the papers that I'm using on the covers. And when I have, whether it's fabric or a hard spine, I like to have a 1.5 inch wide spine for 3 signatures. So I want to make a piece of fabric that is actually 3.5 inches, and I'm using this wide, 3.5 inches wide. I'm using this canvas-like fabric. It's actually a heavy painter's cloth, painter's drop cloth that I got on Amazon, and I like to use it a lot on my spines because it's a good weight, but it's not too heavy and it's not too light. And I like obviously the neutral color works nicely. I did measure the width, but I'm just eyeballing the height because I like to see those threads and I like the torn look, and it doesn't have to be perfect. The top and bottom parts, or really the sides, don't have to be perfect either. So there is I decided to use a label holder, I think that metal piece is called, and I wanted it to be kind of centered once I attach my fabric, kind of centered from the edge of the fabric to the edge of the book, if that makes sense, hopefully. And so I measured that too, and then I punched holes with my awl. I just put some matte medium down over the top of my napkin to give it a layer of protection. I had forgotten to do that earlier. So to attach my label holder, I'm using Fabri-Tac glue. Fabri-Tac works well with metal, in my experience, as well as fabric. It holds, for me, it holds things like metal pieces quite well. And I've been using it for several years. Nothing's fallen off yet. So I attached that with the Fabri-Tac. With those brads holding it in place, you almost don't need to use Fabri-Tac, but sometimes if it's not glued down at the bottom, once you put your label in, it might slip through the bottom there. So I like to use the Fabri-Tac. So I've done that. Something I didn't say before is with my fabric, I have a 1.5 inch spine, and then I have a 1 inch overlap of fabric on either side to attach to the covers. You'll see how that looks in just a moment there once I attach that. But first I will attach the the papers on the front covers. This is some pretty good size or good heavy scrapbook paper. It's a Tim Holtz scrapbook paper, and it doesn't really show those brads in the back at all. And I mean, there's no bump or anything, and it hides them well, as you can see. So again, I'm measuring using my glass mat, a 1.5-inch spine, and then I'm going to glue this piece on there. You can see I put glue down on one side. I'm going to glue that down. I want it to be relatively straight, relatively close to 1 inch. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as close to straight as I can make it. And that's pretty good because I didn't want this one to be too wonky. So I'm going to use some fabric on the front that I showed really quickly there. I'll show that more later, and I already have chosen my papers for the inside of the book. For this tutorial, I'm just showing how I made the cover. Not really showing how I chose the papers or how I sewed them in. I have a playlist of a bunch of videos where I've shown how I make journals, and some I've shown how I sew in the pages, and some I don't. I use a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, and if you don't know how to do that, there are lots of tutorials on YouTube, and I do show that in some of my videos, as I said before. So this is the fabric that I'm using on the outside of my cover. So I have the fabric attached already on the inside. The fabric, that one is going on the outside. And I'm doing the same thing, cutting a piece that's 3.5 inches wide, and then I'm measuring the book so I can cut it to be the height of the book, which is 8.5 inches. So I do want that to be close to those measurements. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and you'll see that it's not perfect, but it looks pretty good to me. I am using the Fabri-Tac glue again. It's a pretty good strong glue, and for this process I decided it would be a good glue to use. I'm centering, I spread that all around with my finger and I'm centering my book on the fabric, just eyeballing that one, which is sometimes where I get into trouble, but this one wasn't too bad. I think I did a pretty good job. So now you just want to press these this pieces of fabric down with your bone folder, with your finger. Just try to press it down so that they attach together on the 2 fabric pieces and also on the cover. I'm going to let that dry and come back, and I trimmed a few extra threads that were hanging out. I'll do the same on the back off camera. And then I decided that I would add some of this lace. I call this lace. It's not, I don't think it's lace, a doily. I don't know what it is. And I just lay it down and kind of figure out how I want to glue it down. And that's how I decided to do it. And then just trim the pieces that stick out at the top and the bottom. I kind of went back and forth a little bit on that, to be honest, that I didn't, I edited out. And then I switched to the Art Glitter Dries Clear glue. There's no glitter in it. It's a good glue too. I like that fine tip for applying the glue on this piece. It's a lot easier, and I just do that as you saw me starting out. I do that on the whole piece, just little by little. It's a little bit tedious, but it doesn't take that long. And that glue is also a really good strong glue. So I'm trimming that, as you can see there. And if there are any pieces that are not totally stuck down, you can go back and add a little bit more glue, as I'm doing there with that fine tip. It really works well. And there is pretty much my cover all done. I had some extra scrapbook papers, and I'm just showing you how I can make those into pockets or something like that later on. And I have a sari silk ribbon, which I love to use as a closure for many of my journals. Just showing you how that looks, and I'll do a quick little flip through of the papers. I use tea-dyed papers, sheet music, some beautiful marbled paper, that beige paper that I'm going to make into pockets. I just sew that up at the ends to make a pocket. And then I use some old ledger paper and some Edith Holden book pages, dictionary pages. I did strengthen or put together my Edith Holden pages with some washi tape that I was showing there real quick. And so that's pretty much my journal. I thought I was going to use that sari silk ribbon, which I will show you in a moment, as a closure, but honestly I have just left it without that. I think it's fine without. I stamped the word journal on a piece of tea-dyed paper, and I added that into my label holder. You see that there. Now, I thought I was finished, but I was looking at those birds and they kind of got a little bit dulled down because of the green background that they were on. So I took these Neocolor 2 crayons out. I call them crayons. I'm not sure if that's the right term. And I just added some color to the birds. And it's very subtle, but it really adds a nice touch, I think. I don't know that you will be able to see it on the video that well, but in person it really adds a really nice touch. And then the Neocolors are kind of like, in my view, they're kind of like a watercolor in a crayon form. So if you take a brush with some water, you can kind of spread it around a little bit more. So that's what I'm doing there. And I go in with some blue, some orange, yellow, colors like that. And then in a moment I'll go over the black parts of the bird with black. And the branches, I add a little bit of black too, and also some brown, and then use my brush again. And that now is pretty much my video. I know that I went kind of fast on this, but I don't like to make my videos too terribly long. But I think hopefully I've explained how I made this well enough that you all understand it. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe we'll give it a try. I especially love the napkin technique. And I love the way my journal turned out. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.